Welcome to Tigray Media House. My name is Malikti Brahana. We have surpassed 1 year since the genocide and war began on Tigray, which means it's been more than 1 year since the people of Tigray have been under siege. There is no running water, no electricity, no phones, no internet, no medicine. All the hospitals have been destroyed, no food in the region since all of the farmlands were destroyed. The people of Tigray are still under siege. That has not changed. But one thing that is promising is that it sounds like the US Senate will be in a position where they will be asked to vote and consider whether they think what's happening in Tigray meets the definition of genocide. Tigrayans in the diaspora have been keeping track of crimes over the past more than a year now. And one of the escalating marks in genocide falls under discrimination. Tigrayans have been discriminated against throughout the entire year, including early on when peacekeeping soldiers were disarmed in neighboring Somalia, Tigrayan peacekeeping soldiers. Then you had that continued to escalate, and you had the government asking for lists of Tigrayans who worked for different companies and different agencies in the country. You had Tigrayans who were removed from their positions with Ethiopian Airlines. You had guards and people who worked for the African Union of Tigrayan background who were asked to step down. Tigrayans removed from banking services in terms of their employment, and that continued to the point where just recently landlords were asked to turn over the names of their Tigrayan tenants as mobs went door to door and vigilantes went door to door looking for Tigrayans and deciding whether they were terrorists and working for TPLF. It's hard to believe in some ways, but in other ways it's not. There currently are concentration camps set up all over Ethiopia and especially surrounding Addis Ababa, where Tigrayans are being held for no other reason than their ethnicities. It's not hard for us to believe because Tigrayans have been attacked all over the world, not just in Ethiopia. We know that just yesterday, video footage came out of a Tigrayan in Nairobi who was forcibly removed by a mob from his car. He is now missing, and his wife does not know where he's at. Here in Colorado, there was a Tigrayan car dealership that was set on fire. At another event, Tigrayans were maced. And today's guests are going to talk about how they were attacked by a mob in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But first, before we get there, we want to show you a clip of what happened.
Don't touch her.
It's a public space. Mom. Do not touch me. Do not touch me. Don't touch me. This is a public space.
Guys, why don't you just go mind your business over there? What are you doing, guys?
No.
Just guys, stay away.
No, she grabbed my brain.
It's okay, that's a cop. Thank you.
Okay, she just kicked me. That's an officer. She just kicked me. She pulled my hair.
Guys.
She just pulled my hair.
There's so many people.
She pulled my hair.
Wait. Quiet. There's a cops in here.
What is going on?
Somebody pulled my hair. They're kicking me. One of the girls. I'm here because it's a public place.
Guys, why don't you?
I have every right to be here. I have every right to be here. That's okay. I don't care what you want. I don't have to. This is a public
You
space.
mind to know if you take it?
Can we walk you out somewhere?
No, this is a public space. They want now because they want to be violent. Get my hair pulled. I get kicked. Okay, so evacuate them.
Nobody should touch you.
Every few minutes them touching my hair.
So nobody should
No.
Just, take
I
her
can be
outside.
here.
You gotta take her outside. Take her out.
No, I don't have to.
She's the one disturbing the
I
crowd.
do not. I'm one single person. Why are you going to kick me out?
I'm trying to understand what's going
Okay,
on. What is going
I
on?
came here.
Why did you
A
come
public space.
But why are you here?
Because I can be.
Yeah, I know, but are you causing problems? Like,
I
what's
am
going
not.
on? Are you
I
here
can't
for this?
stand here.
Are you here for
I am
this?
here exactly for this.
So then what happened?
They started pulling my hair
For what?
because I had a sign that said Ethiopia is starving over 5 million people, including my mother and younger siblings. Which is the truth. That's not a lie. I have every right to be here. If you kick me out, you are on the wrong side of it. I have every right to be here.
You gotta go. Guys, everyone go that way. You guys need to move. You guys need to move. Yeah, you guys need to move.
They pulled my hair.
Wow. Welcome, Helen and Samrawi. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I'm sure that video was triggering. It certainly triggered me. Tell me what you were, Samrawi, tell me what you were thinking in that moment and how it felt to have that mob surrounding you in that way.
A lot of feelings, to be honest. I think anytime like somebody's being like physically pushed and moved around, there's like that immediate anger, like you're just so angry, like you're just being pushed around, and it's everybody in the crowd. You can't even like pinpoint only one. It's people of all ages, and they're just all after you. They're pushing you, they're kneeing you, they're kicking you, they're pulling your hair, and it's coming left and right. And so there's just so much going on. And then on top of that, you hear like certain words just stick with you. Like in the middle of it, I hear them saying, "Oh, take her out," and it makes it infuriates me, because it makes me think of like, oh my gosh, what are my people back home feeling? Like they're in their country, they have every right to be there, and because they don't want to assimilate, because they don't stand for oppression, it's wipe them out. And it's just so many emotions that go on, and watching it, more than the physical like pushes, it's more of like the words that make me associate with like, I can't even imagine what our families are going through there.
Did you recognize anyone in the crowd, or was it just kind of a blur with everything happening at the same time?
I caught a few faces, specifically the ones that I seen do it 2 times, and that were very aggressive, especially the person that had pulled my hair, which is why I kept emphasizing on that part. And, as I was walking in there, I did see familiar faces, people that I would go and eat with, people that I would go party with, people that I've known for years and years and years. So there are familiar faces, sadly, there. But in that moment, it was just a whole bunch of faces of different ages, women, men, yeah.
Helen, I want to bring you in. You were born here, born in the States. And tell me how you felt, because I know you recognized people in that crowd as well. How did that feel to see maybe your friend's parents and them just watching or participating instead of trying to help you or stop what was happening? How did that feel?
It was very shocking, and also hurtful, because it was friends' parents, but also friends themselves. People like I called sisters and family, and it was very hurtful because they were purposely antagonizing us. So like Samrawi said, it wasn't only the physical, it was more the verbal, and I saw family of family as well too. So it's not only friends, it's family of family, people that we've had family events together, weddings, Christinas, everything. So it's shocking, but also like very hurtful.
And you were slapped, right? Somebody physically assaulted you. Mm-hmm. Were either of you expecting that, to be physically assaulted? I'm going to get to the verbal part in a second, because I think we expect that now after a year of speaking up for your families and trying to end the war. I know the verbal assaults have been there the entire time, but did either of you expect to actually be physically, she assaulted you?
I didn't expect that. I did not. Like you said, the verbal I expected, and it just so happened to be that we were both on live when it happened. So no, that just still came out of left field, and it was very, very, very frustrating. I'm still frustrated about it, shocked, especially for it to be such an older woman. Like the way she did it, I felt like she was degrading me. It was just, yeah. But like Samrawi said,
Did anyone try to stop it? I know the police officers were like they had to form like a human shield around you to stop that mob from attacking you. But did anyone else try and stop it? Or was everyone happy and just like partaking in that abuse?
Yeah, that's the part that, like, you asked, did we expect to get hit? And like me personally, I prepared for it. I hoped that it wouldn't happen. But you never know. But I was surprised at how, I would expect maybe somebody my age to throw a fist or something in a girl. But it was people's uncles, it was grown men, older women, and they had peacekeepers there, but it was one of them in a yellow vest, and they didn't keep the peace whatsoever, at all. Nobody was trying to de-escalate it, meaning like not, but besides the police. But that was one of the things I would have thought, somebody, at least one person would have been like, hey, like actually got in between it and been like, this is a young girl, we're not going to do that. But what I felt was that they were feeding off of each other. At first it was one person, and then it was more people, and then it was just a circle. I'm like, they just fed off of each other.
Wow. And what were you doing in that, right before that attack happened? You were holding your signs. Were you saying anything, or were you just walking around with your signs, or like what led to that moment?
Yeah. So initially, we were just holding the signs. And the only thing that I said was, when somebody went and tried to grab me, I said, "Don't touch me." That's the first word that I uttered. And when I'm holding the signs, it was just attack. And the sign was ripped to pieces. Still, I was not saying anything, but I had already drawn myself out, and they had already read the sign, and they said, "Terrorist, TPLF, you don't belong here, junta," things of that nature. And it just went from there on. It was just physical.
So let's talk about that, because the verbal abuse that's been going on over the past year, and sometimes that's much harder to forget than being physically attacked. So you could hear, I watched the whole video that you posted, and you could hear them calling you junta and calling you thieves, for example, and there were a lot of TPLF and that kind of thing. People were booing at you. That's pretty painful. There's been a whole camp. So it's also contradictory, because for the past year, and especially recently, we hear people say this is a war on TPLF, right? We keep hearing that over and over again, even though we know this is a war not on a political party, but a war on the people. At least that's how it's played out, regardless of perhaps maybe how it was started. How did that feel to you? And what do you say to people who say this is not a war on the people, when the people show up and they get called all the names that you were called?
Well, they are making it obvious that what they're saying and their actions don't align. They see a person, like, you don't know my political position, like what political party I want, just by looking at me. But if I'm wearing a Tigrayan shirt or something that says negative about Ethiopia, I'm automatically an enemy, which then they associate with TPLF. And it's not even just in the US. Like, the amount of times, yes, US diaspora have said, "Oh, TPLF," but even the children that are being starved, the mothers, the young girls that are being raped, it has absolutely nothing to do with TPLF. It's just what they cling on to, because they think that's their golden ticket to getting away with genocide. That's how I see it. And that's what their actions show.
You held your head up the entire time. I think a lot of people who watched the video were really shocked by how well composed that you were. First of all, how did you do that? How were you able to keep your calm in that moment of just pure chaos? And just what were you thinking?
Yeah. Normally, I think any person, like, when you're being pushed, your first instinct is to swing back or hit or defend yourself, like, and physically, attack. But I knew that I had a purpose there. My purpose there was not to fight anybody. It was exist, meaning show up. It was resist, meaning I have every right to be there. And then it was expose, because they want to be there talking about peace and unity. And as soon as somebody that calls out what their government is doing, it's attack, attack, attack. They are TPLF. And so for me, that was more important than getting one punch in and, you know, get an eye for an eye, whatever it is. So that's what kept me grounded is I'm like, no, there's a purpose to this. I did not come here to fight anybody. And that's how I was able to do it.
Wow. Helen, did the woman who assaulted you, did she get a ticket? Or what happened with that?
Oh, yeah, there is a detective following up, and her information was taken, and I am going to proceed with charges because my ethnicity is not a crime, but putting your hands on someone is, and they need to learn, and that's not how things work around here. So
I want to check in with you both, and just, you know, in the video, I heard someone would say, I'm speaking up for people who are being starved, including my mother and my siblings. So both of you, just take a minute and tell me about your family that is in Tigray. Have you had any contact with them? What do you know about their situation and how that's impacted you?
Oh, okay. So yeah, like I said in the video, my mother is there. My younger siblings are there. Their status, I'm not sure. It's been 7 months that I have not been able to speak with them. So whether they're dead, whether they're alive, whether, you know, they're depending on leaves to survive, whether my mother is trying to decide which child to feed, that's all up in the air. You know, I have in the beginning of when things had started, I did get news. I've had family and friends die due to the genocide. And other than that, I mean, like everybody else, family members, friends that are being detained, taken to concentration camps, on locations. It's kind of all very similar stories with a lot of us, which is very sad, but it shows you the scale and the extent of the atrocities that are being committed.
Mm. And Helen, tell me about your family. I know you were born here, but you've been to Tigray before. Tell me about who you're in touch with, if anyone, or what the situation is for your family.
So same, you know, aunts, uncles, cousins. I have an uncle that raised me. He moved back there from here. And then my grandmother as well, who came here many times and raised me as well too. We haven't had contact for months, like Samrawita said, so I don't know what's going on. I know she's my grandmother, she's elderly. I don't know how she's doing with her health. So everything's up in the air, and that's exactly why we keep fighting the way we do. We went there to expose them, like Samrawi said, but also counter protest, and we actually got to do that because they were protesting for themselves. So they were like in a corner where a stage, so their backs was turned against the passerby. So we talked to so many people, explain what's going on, what they're there for. And then twice they would come up, one or two, and just be like, she's lying. And then I would end it with, believe what you want. You could do your own research, but I am giving you facts. They're just claiming I'm lying. So take that as it is. And a lot of people did. They heard us out, and it's just, we got to show the world how they are, but also do what we needed to do, which is advocate for and explain what's happening with the Tigray genocide.
The activism of young Tegaru, I think, has shocked the world. What young Tegaru in the diaspora all over the world have been able to accomplish in the span of 1 year is pretty Herculean. You may not know it, you may not recognize it today, but I think the stories that will be written about the work that you all have done is pretty powerful. Tell me about your activism. Tell me obviously you went right into the belly of the beast a couple of days ago, but I know you've been in this for the past year. Tell me about some of your activism and what you've been doing.
So it's basically this, every protest that's been here, or if it's in the Boston area, New York, DC, I've been chanting. And it's the way I started actually was I went to the first protest we had here when the genocide first started, so a year ago now. I did not go preparing to chant. The mic was just handed to me, and I could not tell you what I said that day, but it was just emotions that came out. And from there, it's like, oh, I have this in me. And that's where it started, because it's not, for me, it's not about advocating heroism. It's just, my family's in this situation and the world needs to act now. So there isn't anything else I'd rather be doing. basically.
Summer, wait, tell me about your activism.
Let me see. I mean, besides like the attending the protests and, you know, like DC, New York, Boston, or Vermont and whatnot, it kind of looks different every day. It's kind of more become of like incorporating into my everyday activities. So it's, you know, a lot of the time is looking up news, like what is happening. I feel like that's also a big part of like, you know, activism, because for us, it's like we have to know what's going so that we're putting correct information out there. And then, you know, reaching out to my local officials, like emailing them, calling them, bothering them nonstop. And even just like everyday conversations, like if I'm in an Uber, they'll ask, where are you? So just the small things, wherever I can, whenever I can is really what I do. On some days I'll do like video clips and I'll post it on Facebook and try to get information that way, and kind of try to like make information that we all know like more easily accessible and like easier to understand for people that might not have been in this throughout the entire year. But yeah, I don't even know that I call it activism anymore. It's just more of like, yep, this is, until we don't have to, it's really like Tigray is the topic every day, basically.
Wow. One thing that surprised me because I talk to a lot of young people, because I'm really intrigued by how so many young people came together, many of whom have never even been to Tigray. I know both of you have, but that really intrigued me. And I feel like people have learned more about themselves and where they came from over the past year than they've ever known. Do you think that's true? Is that true for you? And tell me one thing that you've learned or taken from this past year after being so involved in everything Tigray.
Well, I can start. I've learned so much about myself and about Tigray. Before this year, I didn't even know what the word for somebody that was from Tigray would be called. Like, I've always my entire life claimed Ethiopia so heavily. I was, you know, Ethiopian queen this, Ethiopian queen that, like everything, almost to the point I almost got my license plate like that, which I didn't. But I've learned so much about myself, and also a lot of the history, because I'm like, whoa, like this doesn't make sense. And in learning about myself, like I've found it easier to be able to explain it to other folks that are also, you know, at the basic knowledge level, because I feel like that's where I was at. And it's been like, it's been a hard journey, but something that I got out of it was definitely like finding myself.
I'll ask you the same question, Helen.
So yeah, same thing. I've learned a lot of lessons from the fact that I have this in me to public speaking is not my thing, was never my thing, but all of a sudden it is. And then also what it means to be Tigray, because like Samrawi said, I mean, I was considering myself Ethiopian, and I was also very proud of like my Tigray culture and everything growing up. That's the way I connected to my culture. My grandmother, I learned Tigrayans speaking with her, and then the dancing, I just love dancing. But I learned the real meaning of Tigray when I saw like what you said, how everybody stood up when it was time to stand up, and to see that we all can do that and it just comes out of nowhere is just the real meaning of being a Tigray.
Wow, amazing. I will never forget when a young person told me, I didn't know that Wayane meant revolution. And I thought, wow, this has been a real awakening, especially for young Tagaru all over the diaspora. Samrawi, you posted something on your Facebook that was interesting to me, and it was about when the Nazis took Manhattan. There were 20,000 Nazi sympathizers who gathered, and there was a Jewish man who made it through, who was brutally attacked. And I know it's clear how that relates to like what happened to you in so many more ways than we can even imagine, right? There's so many parallels between those two stories. Would you do it again? Would you put yourself in that situation again? Was it?
Oh my goodness, it was 100% worth it. Like without a doubt, because I had like a purpose, a reason why I did it. And you know, when you follow through, you stand your ground. Like it, I feel like they were exposed, you know, because I feel like for the longest time, I felt like my role in all of this is like, oh, trying to get the international community to save us. And then when that kind of, you know, fell through, I felt like it kind of fell through. I was like, okay, well then what is my purpose now? Like, what do I do? And I'm like, okay, you know what? The truth is on our side. We just have to expose it. I would do it 1,000 times again.
I think it's interesting because I still engage with some Ethiopians who were very much a part of my life in the past, who maybe are not as much anymore, and who don't acknowledge the suffering that's happening in Tigray and why it's happening. I selectively still engage with some people because I think sometimes you just have to hold a mirror up to people. And I feel like that's one of the things that you two did by showing up and, you know, being in their face. And it was incredibly brave. I want to give you a chance to give your final words. But I also want to say that one of the things that I think was really sad about what we saw, I mean, you were physically attacked and you were pushed around and you were called lots of names, but one of the saddest parts of all of that is all of those people live in America. They live in a place where they're safe, and they live in a place where they don't have to live under the brutal dictators that they're uplifting by holding these rallies. And meanwhile, the people who do are suffering and dying, and that you live comfortably in the West and have the nerve to try and shut down and quiet the voices of people who have to live under the brutality. It's just a really sad thing. So I think you do have to hold a mirror up to these people. But I want to give you a chance just to give your final words. And TMH broadcasts via satellite, and people will see it in Sudan, and they'll see it throughout Tigray. So is there anything that you want to say, or any words that you want to make sure people understand?
I can go first. I'll just say, Ayahumnaina, they might try to silence you, but they're not going to silence us, and we're going to keep fighting for you.
Yep, until our very last breath.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Well, I have to tell you, ladies, that you are incredibly brave, just incredibly brave. I'm glad you're okay. And this will go down in history. You're on the right side of history. You told that officer, if you make me leave, you're on the wrong side of history. And I thought, that's exactly right. So thank you for all that you do. Keep fighting and keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.